For 20 years, I've sold pork at the Liberty Market, and for 20 years, people have been scared of me. It's because I'm hard. My face is a permanent scowl. A decade ago, a little girl, skinny as a bean sprout, started stealing meat from my stall every single day. I never said a word. The neighbors all said I was a fool who'd been robbed blind. 4:30 in the morning. The sky was still a dead, bruised gray as the market's iron gate groaned open, to shriek like a giant beast yawning, exhaling a foul breath of fish guts, damp earth, and slaughterhouse blood. My name is Frank Gallo. Around here, they call me Frank the Blade. I flicked on the lights over my stall. The weak yellow glow made the half-hog on my butcher block glisten, and it carved deeper shadows into my face. A thin scar, running from my eyebrow to the corner of my mouth, seemed to squirm in the light like a pale centipede. Thwack! I swung the 30-pound cleaver, my arm a blur of motion. The blade fell, splitting the carcass clean down the spine with a single, brutally efficient crack of bone. I didn't even blink. A few of the other vendors, just setting up, flinched at the sound. Next to me, Eddie, the chicken guy, was yanking a flapping hen from a cage. He shot me a look with his beady little eyes, his words as greasy as his chicken-stained apron. "Frankie boy, what's got you so pissed off today? Somebody kick your dog? So what's it gonna be? Which cut are you donating to the cause this morning?" I ignored him. I picked up my honing steel and gave the cleaver a few sharp scrapes, shing shing, a sound that could peel the skin off your ears. I hated Eddie. I hated his smug face, the way he acted like he was in on some great joke at my expense. Most of all, I hated the way he looked at me, like I was some pathetic, hopeless idiot. By 6, the market was starting to fill up. There was always a strange bubble of empty space around my stall. People who wanted meat would hover 3 feet away, craning their necks, but few dared to get close. They were scared of me, of my face, of the cleaver in my hand that could split bone like firewood. Just then, a tiny figure squeezed through a gap in the crowd. It was her, Maya. I had a name for her, Bean Sprout. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, with limp, straw-colored hair and a complexion that had never seen the sun. The faded, old-school uniform she wore hung on her like a sack, her arms as thin as reeds. She wouldn't look at me. Her big eyes were locked on a small strip of pork belly hanging from hook at the side of my block. I'd left it there for her this morning. A perfect piece, fat marbled with lean, not too big, just enough for a meal. Her routine was almost comical. First, she'd pretend to look at the other cuts of meat, shuffling sideways, using her small body to block the view of the crowd. Then, moving so fast she nearly tripped, her little hand would dart out, snatch the pork belly, and stuff it into a faded canvas book bag. I saw the whole thing in my peripheral vision. I could even see her fingers trembling with nerves, her cheeks puffing out as she held her breath. I deliberately turned my head and barked at a woman who was hesitating over some chops. "You buy in or browse in? Get out of the way if you ain't buy in." The woman jumped and scurried off. Just as Bean Sprout thought she was in the clear, about to slip back into the crowd, Eddie's voice cut through the market chatter, high and shrill like a chicken getting its neck wrung. "Hey, stop, thief. That little brat is stealing. Frank, you blind? She's robbing you right under your nose." His shout made everyone turn. Dozens of eyes zeroed in on the small figure, now frozen in place. Bean Sprout's face went white as a sheet of paper. She clutched her book bag, her body shaking like a leaf in a storm. She stared at the closing circle of people, tears welling up in her eyes, but she bit her lip, refusing to let them fall. A hot, black rage surged through me. Thunk! I slammed my cleaver down into the butcher block. The blade sank a good inch into the wood, the whole massive table shuddering. I looked up, my bloodshot eyes locking onto Eddie. The words came out through gritted teeth. "You say one more goddamn word, and I swear to God I'll cut that rotten tongue out of your head and serve for lunch." I didn't yell, but everyone in the market heard me. The raw menace, straight from the killing floor, dropped the temperature by 10 degrees. Eddie's neck disappeared into his shoulders, the rest of his words dying in his throat. The fat on his face jiggled, but not another sound came out of him. The crowd of onlookers went quiet, their chatter turning to whispers. Frank's really lost it, defending the kid who's stealing from him. I know, right? She does this every day. He must have a screw loose. Tough guy act is useless if you're just a sucker. I didn't care what they said. I pulled the cleaver from the block and walked, stone-faced, over to Bean Sprout. She squeezed her eyes shut, her little body trembling even more violently. I didn't look at her. I just said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Get lost." She looked like she'd just been granted a pardon. Her eyes flew open, and she gave me one quick, complicated look before clutching her bag and bolting through the crowd without a backward glance. I went back to my stall, ignoring the curious and mocking stares. From the pocket of my greasy apron, I pulled out a small, palm-sized notebook, its black cover worn smooth. I flipped it open and, with the pencil stub tucked inside, drew a heavy, deliberate line next to a long column of tally marks. The notebook was filled with them, page after page, each mark carved into the paper. A voice only I could hear spoke in my head. "Kid, today's pork belly makes 1,256. Why'd I let her do it? What was this ledger really for?" I didn't know. All I knew was that this was a long game I'd been playing for over 3 years, and it was nowhere near the end. But Eddie's vicious little mind wasn't deterred by one threat. He was like a rat in the sewer, stubborn and foul, always looking for a way to watch me fall. In the days that followed, his sneer grew wider, his contempt more obvious. He stopped shouting and started whispering, spreading his story with added spice to the other vendors and even some of my regular customers about this stupid butcher protecting a little thief. "You should have seen it," he'd say. "The kid's quick, real slick. And Frank the Blade, he just stands there like a block of wood, watches her take it. I try to help him out, and what does he do? Threatens me with a cleaver. I'm telling you, that little witch has got him wrapped around her finger." The rumors buzzed around me like flies, irritating and constant. Some of my regulars started avoiding my stall, preferring to buy less fresh meat from someone else. I knew Eddie was behind it. He'd even complained to Henderson, the market manager, a few times. Henderson was a weasel who bent for whoever greased his palm, and Eddie was always slipping him something. That afternoon, the market was slow. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. I had a bad feeling. Sure enough, just as Bean Sprout's small frame appeared, I saw Eddie shoot a meaningful glance toward Henderson, who was lurking in a corner. She moved like she always did, head down, a little ghost slipping silently toward my stall. Just as her hand was about to touch the piece of pork loin I'd set out for her, Eddie and Henderson burst from the side. "Gotcha! Red-handed!" Eddie's triumphant roar echoed through the market. One of his fat hands clamped down on Bean Sprout's impossibly thin wrist, while his other hand pointed at her like he'd just caught a master criminal. Henderson stood with his hands behind his back, trying to look official and important. Bean Sprout was terrified. Her face was ashen. The piece of meat fell from her grasp with a soft slap, landing in the grimy water on the floor. She struggled, but she couldn't break free from Eddie's iron grip. "Frank, what do you have to say now? We caught the thief for you. You ought to thank me." Eddie beamed at me, his jowls quivering with delight. The other vendors and a few customers gathered around, pointing and murmuring. Bean Sprout was so scared, she finally broke. Tears streamed down her dirty cheeks, and a choked, whimpering sound, like a kitten's cry, escaped her throat. The fire in my gut roared to life, scorching its way up to my skull. I put down my knife. I picked up the towel hanging nearby and very slowly wiped the grease from my fingers one by one. My movements were deliberate, so slow the air around me felt thick and still. When I was done, I tossed the towel onto the block and walked toward them. My eyes didn't land on Bean Sprout. They went right past her, fixing on Henderson, the manager. I asked her to grab that for my mother. "Is there a problem?" My voice was dead calm, but every word was a shard of ice. Henderson blinked, clearly not expecting that. Eddie got agitated, hopping on his feet. "That's a lie. Your mother's been. When my mother died is none of your damn business." I cut him off, my voice like steel. My glare was so sharp it physically shut his mouth. I took another step, closing in on Henderson. I reached into my apron, pulled out a crumpled $100 bill, and slapped it against his chest. "Here's a tip for your troubles. Now take your dog and get lost." The bill fluttered to the filthy floor, but it landed like a gunshot, a stinging slap across both their faces. Henderson's face went from red to white. He looked at me, then at the money on the ground. Finally, he gave up, grabbed a still protesting Eddie by the arm, and scurried away. The crowd, sensing the show was over, melted away. I bent down, picked up the dirty piece of meat from the floor, and tossed it into the trash can without a second glance. Then I went back to my block, cut a new, bigger, better piece, and put it in a clean bag. I walked over to Bean Sprout, who was still standing there, frozen in shock. I pushed the bag into her arms. My voice was low but firm, leaving no room for argument. "Take it. Now go." She flinched, then finally looked up. For the first time, she looked me right in the eye. Her eyes were huge and dark, like obsidian washed clean by the rain. In them, beneath the lingering fear, was something else, something I couldn't quite name. She didn't say thank you. She just clutched the bag of meat, gave me one long, deep look, and then turned and ran. I watched her disappear around the corner of the alley, a strange mix of feelings churning inside me. I turned back and saw Eddie across the way, spitting on the ground in my direction, his face twisted with hate. I knew this wasn't over, but I didn't care. All I knew was that the look Bean Sprout had just given me had started to thaw something in my heart, a heart I thought had been frozen solid as the meat in my freezer for years. After that whole mess, Bean Sprout didn't show up for days. The small, familiar gap at the front of my stall was suddenly, jarringly empty, and it left an empty space in my chest, too. Every morning, out of habit, I'd still cut a prime piece of meat and hang it in the usual spot. I watched it hang there all day until I had to take it down at closing time. Eddie, having been humiliated, didn't dare confront me directly anymore, but he got even worse behind my back. He started spreading uglier rumors. I bet Frank the Blade has a thing for the kid's mother. Why else would he be spending so much on her? Nah, I heard the mom's a real sicko, stuck in bed all day. No way she's a looker. I think Frank's got one of those. Special interests, in a girl that young. He'd let his venomous words hang in the air, and the others would chuckle knowingly. Those words were like poison-tipped needles, pricking at me from all sides. My business took a real hit. Before, people were just afraid to come close. Now, they wouldn't even look in my direction. The few old regulars who still came by would avoid my eyes, their own filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. I didn't bother to explain. In my world, fists and knives did the talking better than words. Wasting my breath on these gossiping idiots wasn't worth the effort. Life went on like that, under a perpetual gray cloud, until a rainy night a week later. The rain was coming down in sheets, hammering on a market's tin roof, so hard it sounded like the whole world was about to flood. I closed up later than usual. By the time I cleaned up and thrown on my raincoat to head home, the sky was pitch black. There were no lights in the alley, just a stretch of inky darkness. Guided by the faint glow from distant storefronts, I picked my way through the puddles. And there, in a corner piled with junk, I saw a small, huddled figure. It was Bean Sprout. She was just squatting in the corner, letting the cold rain soak her to the bone. She was hugging her knees, her head buried in her arms, her tiny body shivering in the wind. My heart felt like it had been seized in a fist. I walked over, took off my own heavy raincoat, which still held my body heat, and draped it over her. The sudden warmth made her jump. She looked up, startled. I took the envelope. It was cold and damp in my hand. I opened it and found a few crumpled, waterlogged bills. Ones, fives, the biggest was a 20. Altogether, it probably wasn't even enough to buy a pound of good ribs. A sharp, hot feeling stung my nose and rushed to my eyes. I pushed the envelope back toward her. My voice was rough with emotion. Not enough. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. She thought I was saying the money wasn't enough. She bit her lip hard and lowered her head, her shoulders shaking as silent tears mixed with the rain on her face. I sighed. Come with me. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and started walking. After a moment's hesitation, she scurried to catch up. I took her back to my place. It was a shabby room in an old tenement building behind the market, barely 100 square feet. Besides a bed and a table, there was nothing you could call furniture. The air always smelled faintly of blood and damp mildew. I told her to wash up with some hot water and found one of my clean old t-shirts for her wear. It swallowed her whole, hanging down to her ankles like a gown. I ignored her and went to the small kitchen area. Using some leftover ground pork, I made her a steaming bowl of spaghetti with meat sauce. While I brought the bowl to the table, she was sitting awkwardly on a small stool. At the smell of the food, her stomach let out a loud, traitorous growl. Eat, I said, pushing the bowl in front of her. She glanced up at me, then dug in like a starving wolf cub. The pasta was scalding hot, but she didn't care, slurping it down so fast she had to hiss in air to cool her mouth. Tears streamed from her eyes from the heat, but she never stopped eating. I didn't speak. I just sat across from her, lit a cigarette, and watched. When she had finished every last bit, even wiping the bowl clean with a piece of bread, I stubbed out my cigarette. From a drawer in my nightstand, I took out the little black notebook. I placed it on the table and, for the first time, opened it in front of her. The yellowed pages rustled under the dim light. Every page was covered in dense rows of tally marks. I pointed to one of the pages. Look. She leaned in, her small head almost touching the book. She saw that next to the tally marks, in tiny, cramped handwriting, were notes. Winter, 2012. Kid looks cold. Added some ribs. Good for soup for her mom. Summer, 2013. Too hot. No appetite. Gave her some lean pork, easy to grind up. October, 2013. Heard from the guy at the next stall, she's been coughing. Bought some pork liver for her mom to make congee. Page after page, year after year. I closed the book and looked into her eyes, which were wide with shock and confusion. I told her, word by word, this isn't a debt ledger. This is a record of what you ate, how much you've grown. You're too damn skinny. Like a bean sprout a gust of wind could blow away. When you're grown up, when you're strong, and you've made something of yourself, then you can come settle this account with me. And by then, what you owe me won't be the price of a little meat. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, speechless. In those big eyes, something was melting, gathering into hot, heavy drops that fell, one by one, onto the cover of the black notebook. After that rainy night, it was like an unspoken contract had been signed between us. The word steal, with all its shame and fear, vanished. It was replaced by take. She no longer snuck around like a thief. Every afternoon after school, she would appear in my stall, right on time. No more hiding, no more fear. She would walk right up to me, place her heavy book bag by her feet, and give me a deep, 90-degree bow. It was a gesture so solemn. It was like she was praying. I'd always pretend to be annoyed, waving my hand dismissively before handing her the portion of meat I'd already set aside. Sometimes it was ribs with the cartilage still on, sometimes pork belly with its beautiful layers, sometimes a lean tenderloin. I'd change it up based on the weather or how she looked. I started to learn about her life. Her mother was chronically ill, bedridden, and the cost of her medication was a crushing weight. The entire burden of the household rested on the shoulders of this girl who wasn't even 10. Every day after school, she'd collect cans and cardboard boxes for recycling money, which was only enough for the cheapest rice and vegetables. My pork was the only real protein she and her mother ever got. Soon, she started to repay her debt in her own way. When she came to take the meat, she would accidentally drop her report cards or tests with perfect scores in front of my stall. They were pieces of paper that had been smoothed out 100 times, the bright red 100s and honor roll stamps more vivid than the blood on my butcher block. I'd always pretend to be annoyed as I picked them up, blowing off imaginary dust. Take it. Don't get grease on it. You'll ruin my meat. I'd yell that at her, but as soon as she was gone, I would carefully smooth out the paper and tuck it into my black notebook. The ledger grew thicker and thicker, filled with every award she earned from first grade to fifth. Eddie saw all of this, and he was so jealous his eyes turned green. He couldn't find a reason to attack Bean Sprout anymore, so he turned his venom on me. Well, look at Frank the Blade playing daddy now. Raising a little girl, are we? He'd sneer. I was deboning a pork shoulder at the time. I paused, held up the long, sharp boning knife, and let it catch the light. The edge glinted coldly. It's my business. You got a problem with it? I shot him a cold glance. He immediately backed down, turning away and muttering something about me being a psycho. Life flowed on in this quiet, understood rhythm, until the winter of the year Bean Sprout finished elementary school. One day, she didn't come for the meat. Not the next day, or the day after that. A knot of anxiety started twisting in my gut, but I was too proud to ask anyone about her. On the fourth afternoon, she suddenly appeared in my stall. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she'd been crying all night. She walked right up to me and, with a soft thud, dropped straight to her knees. The entire market went silent. Every eye was on us. She knelt there on the floor, slick with grease and blood, and looked up at me. For the first time, she begged me for something. "Uncle Frank, please. Save my mom. The doctors say she needs surgery. It costs so much money. I don't have any." Her voice was a desperate, trembling sob. "Please, Uncle Frank, I'm begging you, save my mom. When I grow up, I'll do anything for you. I'll be your daughter. I'll take care of you when you're old." She started bowing her head, her forehead hitting the concrete floor with dull, sickening thuds. My heart felt like it was being sliced apart with that boning knife, piece by painful piece. The crowd's whispers rose like a tide. "That kid has no shame, begging like that for her mom. What money could Frank possibly have? He's just a butcher. Let's see how he gets out of this one." Eddie was practically gloating, his arms crossed as he stood by, ready to enjoy the show. I ignored all of them. Without a word, I turned, went behind my counter, and from a hidden compartment at the very bottom, I dragged out a rusty old lockbox. This was everything I had. My life savings. It was the same money I hadn't had when my own father was dying, the life-saving money that came too late. For years, I had guarded this box like it was a monument to my failure. Today, I opened it. I grabbed all the cash inside. Thick wads, thin stacks, big bills, small ones. Walked back to Bean Sprout and stuffed the entire pile in her arms. My voice was loud enough for the whole market to hear. "Get up, kid, and listen to me. This isn't a gift. It's a loan. This is the biggest entry on your ledger. You're going to spend the rest of your life paying it back." She froze, clutching the heavy stack of money, her tears forgotten. I looked at her eyes, where a flicker of hope had been rekindled, and I had only one thought. "Live, kid. You and your mom, you just live. As long as you can live, What does Frank Gallo's money matter? It's nothing. The money didn't work a miracle. It was like a stone thrown into a deep well. It made a splash, then vanished. It bought Maya's mother a few more months, getting her through a cold winter and letting her see the first green shoots of spring. But that was all. Her mother passed away on a sunny afternoon. She went peacefully. Maya told me later that with her last breath, her mother held her hand and said just one thing. Maya, you have to repay Mr. Gallo. The day after the funeral, Maya came to my stall. She was wearing a faded black dress, her eyes swollen, but they held no tears. They held a determination that was terrifying in someone so young. She didn't cry or speak. She just walked up to me, pulled something from her pocket, and placed it gently on my butcher block. It was a silver bracelet, an old design, tarnished and dark in places, but polished smooth from years of being worn. Uncle Frank, my mom is gone. Her voice was raw, like it had been scraped with sandpaper. This is the only thing she left me. From now on, I live for you. She said that last sentence with chilling finality. The silver bracelet lay there on the blood-stained wood, gleaming with a cold light. My chest felt tight, like it was stuffed with cotton. I picked up the bracelet, wiped it on my apron, and pushed it back into her hand, closing her fingers around it. Your mom gave this to you. You keep it, and you listen to me. You don't live for me. You live for yourself and for her. I looked her dead in the eye. The best way to repay me isn't to give me your life. It's to get into the best college in this country and make something of yourself. Show me that Frank Gallo didn't bet on the wrong person. She nodded fiercely, her fist clenched so tight around the bracelet, it was like she was holding onto the entire world. She turned and walked away, her back straight as a ramrod, like a sapling ready to burst through concrete. From that day on, her life seemed to shift into fast forward. She came to get meat less and less. I knew she was spending every spare moment working odd jobs and studying. She washed dishes in diners, hauled debris at construction sites, handed out flyers. Her hands, which should have been holding a pen, grew rough and calloused. But every time she did come, her eyes were brighter, sharper. It was the look of someone who had seen a light in the darkness and was now running toward it with everything they had. I knew that this bean sprout, the one I had watered and fed for years, was desperately soaking up every ray of sun, preparing to break through the earth with astonishing force. The day of her middle school graduation exams, I closed my stall early and waited for her all afternoon under a tree outside the school. When she came out, she spotted me in the crowd immediately. She ran toward me, a smile on her face. Uncle Frank, it wasn't hard, she said. In my ledger, that was the day I recorded the last piece of meat. In the notes section, I wrote only one sentence. Kid, it's time to go conquer your own world. She never came to take meat again. The spot in front of my stall was finally and completely empty. 3 years later, the college acceptance letters went out. It was a sweltering day at the market, the air so thick you could swim in it. The fans just blew hot air around. I was stripped to the waist, slick with sweat, hacking away at a leg of pork. Eddie was next door, plucking a chicken, gleefully gossiping with a customer. 3 years, right? And that little brat hasn't come back once. Told you so. Ungrateful, that's what she is. Frank the Blade really lost out this time. Lost his money, lost the kid. Ha ha ha. The people around him nodded in agreement, their eyes on me filled with a mix of pity and scorn. I didn't say anything. The rage simmering inside me was hotter than the weather. Just then, a tall, slender figure appeared at the market entrance. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, revealing a clear forehead. Her skin was no longer sallow, but a healthy, pale white. Her big eyes were bright and confident. It was Beansprout. No, she wasn't Beansprout anymore. She had grown into a tall, graceful poplar tree. She walked through the noisy crowd, straight to my stall. The entire market fell silent. Every single person was staring at her. Eddie's laughter died in his throat. The half-plucked chicken slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. His eyes were practically bugging out of his head, unable to believe that this poised young woman was the same little thief from all those years ago. Maya ignored them all. Her eyes were only on me. From her canvas tote bag, she took out a crimson folder with gold lettering. She held it with both hands and presented it to me. Then, in front of everyone, she bowed deeply. 3 times. The first bow. The second bow. The third bow. Mr. Gallo, she said, her voice clear, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Without you, I wouldn't be here today. I'll remember what you did for me for the rest of my life. I took the folder. My hands were shaking. It was an acceptance letter. The words on it burned themselves into my eyes. The Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. B. S/M/D. Program. Baltimore. Johns Hopkins. A doctor. My eyes instantly blurred with heat. I tried to blink back the stinging tears, but it was no use. The market erupted. Oh my God, Johns Hopkins. That's one of the best medical schools in the country. That little girl. She's that smart. Frank the Blade. I guess he finally hit the jackpot. Eddie's face was paler than the dead chicken on his block, his mouth hanging open wide enough to fit an egg. He was speechless. I kept my face as hard as I had for 30 years, trying to make my voice sound as gruff as always. What are you crying for? So you got in, big deal. I yelled at her, but my voice was trembling. How are you going to pay for it? Maya smiled, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. It's a full ride, Mr. Gallo. Tuition, room and board, everything. They're even giving me a stipend. I can cover the rest myself. I just grunted. I turned back to my lockbox, pulled out all the money I'd saved over the last few years, maybe $20,000, stuffed it into a black plastic bag, and slapped it into her hands. Take it. You'll need it. Don't go embarrassing me out there. Eddie finally found his voice, a sour whine. That's an 8-year program. She'll be an old maid by the time she gets out. We'll see how she repays you then. Hearing that, I didn't get angry. For the first time, in front of everyone, a real, genuine smile spread across my face. I looked at the girl I had practically raised, at her clear, determined eyes. I looked at Eddie, at everyone, and I said, I can wait. That day, everyone in the Liberty Market saw Frank the Blade smile. They had no idea that the best deal I ever made in my life wasn't selling pork, but betting on this girl's future. Maya went off to Baltimore. Like a bird finally freed from its cage, she soared. For the first 2 years, she was like a homesick kid. She came back for every winter and summer break. She wasn't the little bean sprout who needed my charity anymore. She became my helper. She put on a clean apron and stand beside me, charming customers and making change. She wasn't bothered by the grease and the blood. She fit right in. Her smile and politeness brought more business to my grim stall than I'd ever had. After closing, she'd sit in my tiny room and tell me all about school. About her strict but brilliant anatomy professor, about the silent teachers floating in the formalin tanks, about the thrill of putting on her first white coat, and about her dream of becoming a cardiothoracic surgeon. I didn't understand half the medical jargon, but I loved watching the light that danced in her eyes when she spoke. That light was 1,000 times brighter than the bare bulb hanging over my stall. Those 2 years were the best of my life. I wasn't just a lonely butcher anymore. I was a father with something to look forward to. But everything changed her 3rd year. She got busier. First, she didn't come home for the summer. She said on the phone she was assisting her mentor with a research project and couldn't get away from the lab. Then for winter break, she only came back for a few days, exhausted and rushed. Our conversations got shorter. Often, she'd fall asleep mid-sentence. And then, she vanished. Her 5th year, she said she was starting her clinical rotations and would be swamped. After that, nothing. I'd call her phone. At first, it would just ring and ring. Then, I started getting a number-disconnected message. I wrote letters to the address she'd left me, but they all came back stamped with a cold, impersonal return to sender. Addressee unknown. It was like she had just dropped off the face of the earth. She had disappeared. The whispers from Eddie and the others started up again, growing like weeds in the barren field of my heart. Told you so. An ungrateful snake. Soon as she got a taste of a good life, she forgot all about the folks back here. All that education, and it just taught her how to be cold. But she doesn't even remember the old butcher in the market. Frank the Blade got played for a fool, lost his money, and ended up with nothing. I acted tougher than ever. Who gives a damn? Hope she dropped dead for all I care. I gave up on her years ago. I kept showing up every day, slicing meat, selling meat, my expression fiercer, my words harsher, trying to fight back the looks of pity and scorn. But only I knew the truth. My heart was an empty cavern. Every night, after closing, I'd sit alone in that dark little room and stare at the black notebook in my nightstand drawer. The book, stuffed with her report cards, was something I no longer had the courage to open. I started to doubt everything. Had I made a mistake? Was I a fool who had only managed to move himself? Was my all-or-nothing bet a complete and total loss? In the endless cycle of waiting, disappointment, and self-doubt, I grew old. The years of hard labor and the bitterness coiling in my chest finally took their toll. I started getting chest pains, my heart would flutter, and sometimes, after swinging the cleaver, the world would go black for a moment. I went to a clinic. The doctor was blunt: coronary artery disease, severe ischemia, and signs of heart failure. You can't do this kind of heavy work anymore. You need to stop, immediately. We need to start treatment, and you'll probably need surgery. I sat in the hospital hallway for a long time, holding the diagnosis in my hand. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was just overwhelmed by a profound sense of loneliness. So this was it. Frank the Blade, tough guy for half a century, was going to die alone after all. I thought I had a beacon of light. I never imagined that light would illuminate her path and leave me behind in the darkness forever. That dead of flesh and blood, it seemed, was going to rot inside my heart. 10 years. A full decade had passed since Maya got her acceptance letter. My body was breaking down. The crushing pain in my chest came more and more often, each time feeling like a giant fist squeezing the life out of me. The doctor gave me an ultimatum: no surgery, and I could drop dead at any moment. I didn't have the strength to run the stall anymore. A layer of dust had settled on the butcher block. The cleaver that had been my companion for half my life was starting to rust. I was ready to close up shop for good. On the afternoon, I was about to take down the faded Gallows Prime Meat sign. A delivery guy on an electric bike pulled up to my stall. "Frank Gallo, package for you." I was stunned. In my entire life, the only mail I ever got were utility bills. I took the heavy, square package, wrapped in brown paper. In the spot for the sender's name, I saw two words that made my heart stop. Maya Lynn. The return address was a string of words I didn't recognize, but the first few were crystal clear. Johns Hopkins Hospital, Division of Cardiac Surgery, Baltimore, MD. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. The right hand that had wielded a 30-pound cleaver with perfect stability for decades could now barely hold this small box. Eddie had wandered over, craning his neck to see, his voice dripping with its usual acid. Well, 10 years. The little snake finally remembered you. Huh? Sent you some souvenirs from the big city to shut you up. I didn't hear him. My entire world had shrunk to this box and the name that I both loved and hated. With the entire market watching, I used my trembling hands to tear open the package. I pulled out the contents. The first item, a new, thick, hardcover notebook, almost identical to my old black one. I opened it to the first page. A line of elegant, strong handwriting leaped out at me. A ledger of gratitude to Mr. Gallo. From your student, Maya Lynn. The repayments begin today. The second item, a bank card in a thick envelope. The third item, an even thicker stack of medical reports and printed academic papers. I couldn't understand the complex charts and English text, but when I flipped through them, the titles were all about cutting-edge research in cardiac bypasses, valve repairs, and other heart conditions. And lying on top of the stack was a photocopy of the medical report from my local clinic. I stopped breathing. The fourth item, a professionally framed employee ID badge. The photo showed a young woman in a pristine white doctor's coat, wearing a surgical mask. Her eyes, visible above the mask, were confident, focused, and beautiful. All traces of the timid, frightened girl were gone, replaced by the calm authority of a surgeon. Name, Maya Lynn, M.D. Title, Attending Surgeon, Cardiothoracic Surgery, Johns Hopkins Hospital. Drip. Something hot fell from my eye and landed on the glass frame of the ID badge, spreading into a small, wet circle. I couldn't hold myself up any longer. I, Frank Gallo, the man who had terrorized the market for half his life, who had taken knives and thrown punches, who bled but never cried. I collapsed. Right there, in front of everyone, my legs gave out and I crumpled to the ground. I hugged the package to my chest like a lost child who had finally found his way home, and I began to sob. A loud, howling, guttural cry that tore itself from my throat, filled with 10 years of frustration, loneliness, despair, and in that single moment, a volcanic eruption of joy and pride. I had lost. I had lost completely. I thought she owed me for the meat. I never imagined she was planning to pay me back with my life. The letter was thick. I sat there on the filthy ground, my tears flowing freely, and unfolded it with shaking hands. The market was dead silent. Even Eddie was holding his breath, stretching his neck to try and read the words. Maya's handwriting, like the woman she had become, was neat but carried an undeniable strength. Mr. Gallo, I hope this letter finds you well. Please forgive me for my silence these past 5 years. I didn't disappear on purpose, and I'm not an ungrateful person. The day I first walked into Johns Hopkins, I knew I was carrying the weight of 2 lives, my mother's and yours. In my 3rd year, I heard from an upperclassman from our neighborhood that you were having chest pains. I had a terrible feeling, so I asked him to discreetly get a copy of your medical records for me. The results confirmed my worst fears. Your heart, worn down by years of hard work and stress, was in serious trouble. From that day on, I became a madwoman. I gave up sleep, I gave up rest. I devoured my studies, lived in the lab, and fought for every second of time in the operating room. I finished the 8-year B.S./M.D. program in 7. I studied under the best cardiac surgeon in the country. I chained myself to the hospital, surviving on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. Because I knew that every day I wasn't a world-class surgeon was another day you were in danger. I couldn't contact you. I was terrified of hearing that you'd gotten worse. I was afraid it would break my focus. I was afraid I wouldn't be fast enough or good enough. So I buried all my fear and longing deep inside and channeled it into the precision of my scalpel. Now I've finally done it. I am the youngest attending cardiac surgeon at Hopkins. My mentor says there aren't many people in this country with steadier hands than mine. The money in the bank account is every dollar I've saved from scholarships and my salary. The pin is your birthday. I know you won't want to take it, but please consider it the interest. The new ledger contains the records of every cardiac patient I have saved. Every successful surgery was me, praying for you. Mr. Gallo, you used meat to sustain my mother and me, to build our flesh and blood. Now, it's my turn to protect your heart. This debt of flesh and blood. I will spend my entire career repaying it. At the bottom of the page, a small, faded circle marked where a tear had fallen. By the time I finished, my face was drenched. I was crying so hard I started to laugh, a wild, unhinged sound. I staggered to my feet and held up the framed ID badge like a trophy. My eyes were red and raw as I roared at the stunned, shame-faced crowd of neighbors. You see this? I want every one of you to take a good, long look. This is my daughter, Frank Gallo's daughter, a doctor, a surgeon from Johns Hopkins, and she's coming home to fix her old man's heart. My voice was hoarse and cracked, but it was filled with a pride I had never known. Eddie's face was beet red. He looked like he'd been slapped a dozen times. He tried to shrink back and slip away through the crowd. Eddie, you stay right where you are. I bellowed. I grabbed the new ledger Maya had sent, her ledger of gratitude, and hurled it at him. Read it. This right here is the best damn investment I ever made in my life. The book hit him in the chest and fell open, pages scattering. He stared at the records of lives saved, of medical miracles, and a last bit of color drained from his face. A week later, I was in Baltimore, in the best private room in the cardiac wing of Johns Hopkins Hospital. Maya handled everything. Before they wheel me into the OR, she stood by my gurney in green scrubs, only her bright, determined eyes visible. She took my calloused hand in hers, her grip as firm and warm as it was all those years ago when I pushed that bag of meat in her arms. Don't be scared, Uncle Frank. I've got you. I looked at her, the little girl I had fed with scraps of pork, the ungrateful snake I thought I'd lost forever, the woman who was about to cut open my chest and repair my heart. I smiled. Go on, kid. My life is in your hands. The anesthesia flowed into my veins, and the world began to fade. Just before I went under, I felt like I was back on that rainy night. I was draping my coat over a shivering little girl. She looked up at me, and her eyes reflected all the stars in the universe. The surgery was a complete success. When I woke up from the haze of anesthesia, the first thing I saw was Maya, sitting by my bedside. She had changed into her white coat. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were incandescent. The sunlight streaming through the window haloed her, making her seem to glow. Seeing my eyes open, she leaned in, her gaze flicking over the monitors, her movements professional and gentle. Uncle Frank, you're awake. The surgery went perfectly. How are you feeling? I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. She immediately dipped a swab in water and gently moistened my lips, just as I had once watched her devour that bowl of spaghetti. The roles had been completely reversed. I was the one being cared for now. On the day I was discharged, I gave her the keys to my old apartment and the rusty lockbox. This was always for you, kid, I said. She shook her head and pushed them back to me. Uncle Frank, I bought an apartment near the hospital. 2 bedrooms. It's already furnished. One of the rooms is yours. She paused, then added, and the security code is your birthday. Maya picked me up in a simple, practical sedan. As I walked out of the main entrance of the hospital, I saw something I never expected. Eddie, and a whole crowd of familiar faces from the market. They were holding fruit baskets and flowers, their faces plastered with sickeningly sweet smiles I had never seen before. Frankie, my man, congratulations. Mr. Gallo, your daughter is really something else. We're all so proud of you. Eddie pushed his way to the front, shoving the largest basket into my hands. Frank, buddy, I was wrong. I got a big mouth. I'm an idiot. You're a bigger man than me. Don't hold it against me, okay? I looked at their shifting, pathetic faces and felt nothing. I didn't say a word. I just handed the basket back to him, walked straight through the middle of their crowd, and got into Maya's car. I didn't even bother to give him a second glance. My life had turned a new page. All the old grudges, the mockery, the misunderstandings, they were like the scenery speeding past the car window, left behind me for good. Back in Philly, the first thing I did was shut down the butcher stall I'd run for more than 20 years. I took out the old black notebook with a worn-out cover, and on the very last page I wrote 2 words: paid in full. Then I left the notebook on the empty, clean butcher block. I moved into the room Maya had prepared for me. It was bright and clean, with a big window that let in the morning sun. On my nightstand, there was a framed photo of the 2 of us, taken on the hospital roof. I was in a patient's gown, she was in her white coat, and I was grinning like a fool. Sometimes, when Maya comes home from a long shift, she'll wrap her arms around mine like she's a little girl again. "Dad, I'm craving your pot roast tonight." She calls me Dad now. It sounds so natural, like she's been saying it for years. I'll tie on the new apron she bought me, walk into the spacious, modern kitchen, and pick up a knife. My hands are still steady, my motion still sure. The sunlight floods the room, filling it with the warm smell of cooking, the smell of home. That debt of flesh and blood, which had spanned more than a decade, was finally settled in the warmest way imaginable. Or maybe it was never settled at all. Maybe it just transformed into a deeper connection, something woven into our blood and carved into our bones. A bond that, for all of time, could never truly be repaid.